And within a week and a half, it was accepted, and I was just like, oh my gosh. So I had something to say, and what happened was, Bobby and I both have been on one of those journeys where we lost husbands too soon, and we were faithful and faith-filled women to begin with, and when you have something catastrophic like that happen, I think it just deepens your faith, and it certainly did for me. I've been very active in the Presbyterian Church and Presbyterian women, and so I feel so much at home with all of you because I know you have the same kind of connectional prayer groups and things like that. I've never been too shy about praying. And first time somebody asked me to do it was a great aunt of mine, and I was not prepared. But something came out of my mouth, and she liked it, so I guess it was okay. And then I realized, when you pray to God, it's always okay. So what I did is, during the pandemic, I wanted to do something. And right before that, a really good friend of mine who was a pastor in Leesburg Presbyterian passed away. And I started a prayer group when he became ill, and it grew to about 60 people. And after he passed, they didn't want me to stop. And I wasn't quite ready to stop, so I kept writing prayers every day. And that's how the whole thing began. I think that it's really hard for people to get their kids to pray. And I know that because it's really hard for me to get my son to do it and to do it with his kids. So I wanted to write a book that would open a door, hopefully. And you educators out there and parents probably, you know this too, every morning there's a moment of silence in schools. One of the last years I was teaching English, somebody said to me, well, what do you do during the moment of silence? And it was so weird because it was that year I had decided that for the moment of silence, I was going to pray for each one of my students. And I would go through each list as far as I could go, and then the next day I'd pick up from there, and I just kept doing it. It moved them tremendously when they found out that's what I was doing. And I thought, well, there is a little something in there. And it really helped form a bond between us that was not necessarily allowed, but since they asked the question, I got it out. And I was very happy. Some of them are still praying with me. So I think that's pretty cool. Like I said, I think it's really hard for people to get in the habit. So that's why I did this book. I wanted to show a link between the Bible and me and you, and how what you're reading in the Bible has significance in everybody's daily life. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And I think when you can connect the two, it makes it a stronger bond. So that's really what I was aiming for. Let me see what else I said here. What did I do during the moment of silence at home? Same thing. And sometimes, especially during the pandemic, just think about all the many prayers we had every day about people we knew and people we didn't know, and the fears we had, and our kids have them. And as a high school teacher and a middle school teacher, they really had them. And it was good to be able to just talk about it. And we had a time in after school day, there was a gathering of kids that had 20 minutes. And a lot of times we talked about those things. Sometimes, remember, about 15 years ago when the Beltway bandits were running around and shooting people? Well, my school was right off of 66, and the kids were scared to death. And when we had our little gatherings at the end of the day once a week, that was one of the topics that we had. We didn't really pray, but we wished each other well and talked about how we could be safe. And it was an avenue to open up conversations that high schoolers had about things that they probably wouldn't talk about too much at home. So I wrote the book encouraging people to kind of get in the habit of praying, but also to see how a passage in the Bible can relate to today. Not all of them, because some of them are but a lot of them do fit. And those are the ones that I think it's most important to have. So that's where this all came from, and Bobby was so kind to invite me. Do you have any questions? Yes.
My question would be, do you think that the apparent apathy of people coming to church, and it's all across all the religions, church, going has really decreased. Do you think that's more a nature of so many other things that life presents you to do, and even on Sunday, where it used to be a sacred day, and now there's just so many other things to do, but people still have faith?
Yes. I think they do still have faith. The priorities are kind of different. And one of the things I noticed when my son was growing up was all of a sudden soccer took over on Sundays. And no slam on soccer, but all of a sudden all the kids went away. And it's hard to have a Sunday school class with teenagers to begin with. It's really hard. And when soccer's out there, they were going. And then the parents had to drive them. And seriously, think about how things have changed over the last few decades in your household, how much less time you have to do things. And all of a sudden it's like, well, do I do this or do I go to church? Is it worth the fight to get my kid to come? And sometimes those are things that we just have to work through. And I think that in the end, those that have been brought up in the church and drift away will come back. I think that's something that does happen. It seems like that to me. And I hope so anyway. Anything else?
I had a question. What do you recommend to teenagers that you've worked with to give them any guidance as far as their prayer life? Like a daily discipline, or what do you say to them that seems to be receptive?
Well, of course, in school I couldn't do that. But now I would say, and one of the things that I wanted to do with this book was when I found a Bible passage, I wanted to be able to link it so that the kids could see that there is a connection there. Even though it's old, there are things in there that help us. And I try to not preach to people so much, but to be an example and to ask questions like, well, what should I do if? And I just put the eye on me and then listen to see what they want to tell me that they think I should do about a situation. I did youth groups for a while, and I did kids with, what was that called? In school, I was the sponsor of the student government. And we had lots of conversations like that. And you and Bruce probably did that too, didn't you? Yeah. There are ways. And we used to have organizations in the school who would pull together and get the kids on a weekend to talk about things. And that's when you can talk about values. And it's kind of all about the values. And some people that have faith have a different way of looking at values, but they all have the idea that you shouldn't take something that doesn't belong to you, and you need to be kind to people and help people out. And I think those are things that the school is teaching, as hard as it is, but we have to, because otherwise we'd have a bunch of hoodlums running around. Once they get away from their parents, they're going to do whatever. And so you have to kind of teach them and coach them and coax them into wanting to be better representatives of their class and of themselves. And so that's how I think you could do it. Yes, sir.
So my question is you said you are trying to convince kids to pray. What is your compelling argument for that? What's the reason? Why do you pray?
Oh.
if I'm a kid?
Well, one of the things is a lot of times kids don't know what to do and who to turn to. And so there's this silent God who's waiting for that question and for that ask for help. And I usually encourage people to pray that way and pray to God and pray to ask for and be patient enough to wait for an answer. And I used to say, the thing that I prayed for wasn't the thing that God gave me, but it was the thing that I needed. But I didn't like it very much at first. And I think, I think that's okay too. You just have to kind of settle into that maturity of understanding, and it doesn't come right away. And kids don't like that. We don't like that. Yes?
To piggyback on Tim's question, just the nature of prayers we talked about today in the sermon about friendship, how they need a friend that they can go to confide anything to, because there's so much stress and there's so much on their hearts and minds in the world with all kinds of situations. So I think that nature of prayer to an intimate friend, how can we help our teens, our young people, know that that's an available quality, an available relationship for them?
The teachers that are out there that do it, tell their students, you can come to me. If there's something bothering you, someone bothering you, there's a problem, come to me. And that's one way. They do that. They have found people. It's hard to be in some of the peer groups and feel confident that some of the suggestions given might not be appropriate. And I think that when we had in the last schools I was in, we had moment of silence and we had these conversations and tried to find out, well, what would you do? How would you handle this situation? If it was an English story that had been read and we were talking about, I tried to let the conversation flow out, to not to be judgmental, but to see how do you think this could have been more successful? And when kids have some opportunities for that, I think it's helpful. Right now, we have so many religions and so many faiths and so many lack of faiths that they all collide together and people just want to do their own thing. But for most people, and I know it's for you guys that have had children and raised children or are, you have a set of values that you expect. And as teachers, we did too. So when we saw somebody sneaking a peek at an answer on a quiz, we had to have those serious talks. And I think that holding people accountable, holding people to know that it's okay if you mess up, fess up, fix it. And I think that a lot of parents are that way. And if they have really good parents, and that's one thing that's been a big deal these days. Parents are much more involved than mine were growing up. I had somebody to talk to, and I think that's a good thing.
There used to be an organization, I don't know, this guy used to be my neighbor, but in the schools, Young Life,
Yes, Young Life, that was a while ago.
that provided a nice stepping stone for children.
Yes.
They enjoyed their activities, and they do retreats and camps.
Yeah, we had that in a couple of the schools I was in. It was a small group, not more than 40 total. Out of a school that had 2,000, that was pretty small. But you're right, it did help, and we had some really awesome role models and parents step up to.
Helps if the administration gets involved. I had taught at Lake Braddock in Fairfax County, and my principal actually started a group that kind of came off of Young Life called the Campaigners. He was very much involved in getting children involved in their faith. So it helps if you've got that support.
Do you all have youth group here? Do you have a youth group here? Yes, yeah. Yeah, that's when you get past having children. Yeah.
And so we're really struggling with that.
And I know for a fact that the kids today use a lot of time on the weekends to sleep. They're catching up on that. And, I don't know what's going on with some of them don't go to bed until 1 or 2 in the morning. I couldn't even function if I did that. It would be totally impossible. But I think not to give up and to take every opportunity that you have, whether it's your child or a child, to love them and be kind to them and encourage them to know your name and stuff. Once they kind of make a connection, they don't want to be on the wrong side of that loving relationship. They don't want to be embarrassed and know they did something wrong and can't get out of it. That's where the adults have to say, okay, you messed up. You're sorry. Let's see how we can move forward, because I still love you. You're still going to be here. You're still my child. You're still my student. Let's do this. And that's a hard thing to do. Think about all the times when we've had a little something with somebody and just didn't talk to them forever. And kids do the same thing. They're not quite as nice, maybe, but I think that's why I wrote this book, and that's what I'm hoping to do. Because I know that I put a Bible verse in front of every prayer. And I'm hoping that once you get through the prayers with your children, that the next year you'll read it again and give your own prayer with your own personal, how does it fit into this Bible verse? Because that's when things are going to gel with them. And that's when things gel with other people. If you just show up at church on Sunday and that's the only time you pray, you're kind of lost when you need it. So that's all I can say.
Can you give us an example of that from your book?
Yeah, sure. Let's pick a short one. I'm very verbose, and I'm so sorry. I don't even know if I have a short one.
Do you need glasses?
No, I don't need glasses. Okay, this one is, my child, if you accept my words and treasure up my commandments within you, making your ear attentive to wisdom and including your heart to the understanding of the word. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. And so I ended up saying, I pray to find relevance in today's world. Thank you for providing insight into concerns one might have. I have wanted to find a way to learn more about you. There it is, right there. That's what I put in. That's my words. Have we not learned anything, Lord God? It continues to baffle me how cruel the world was in Jesus' time, and so it is today. And I was obsessed with all of the children and families that were coming in from Mexico sleeping under tin blankets. It just drove me crazy. It was so inhumane. And that's how I related it. And that, to me, that spoke to me a lot, because it just drove me nuts. Every day, you'd see on the TV all these kids, and they were separated from their parents, and they slept on floors, tin blankets, no school. Now, what do you think is going to happen to all those kids? I pray about them still, because they're going to be lost, most of them. So that's how I do it. If I have somebody that's sick in my family, or my son has had some marital relationship issues, haven't we all? I pray about those, and but I can't fix it. I can just try not to hang up. How many of you get frustrated with your kiddos? And I only have one, and thank goodness. I used to laugh about it, but oh my gosh. And so I pray about, well, how is it I can help other people? And what can I say that will take some of the fire and heat out of the problem and bring some of the love of God into their hearts. Just stop for a minute and think about it. And that's where I was.
So, for example, to make it real for us, and I love that you had one child, a child of your own, but you're ministering to many children through your work. So many children that you're parenting and counseling and bringing God's Spirit awareness to. So in a conversation, for example, that you would have with somebody that you might meet or be teaching, and you're picking up that there's some problems. How would you work with that in a moment in terms of being able to minister to that young person?
Well, first of all, it's really hard to get them separated so that you can have a one-on-one conversation and invite them to share more with you. And a lot of times that's really what it takes, because you can tell when somebody comes in and slams their stuff down on the desk and you have done nothing since the day started to cause that it's not about you. And that's the hardest part. It's about whatever's going on with them. And that's one of the things I will never forget. This young man I had at one of my schools who's in a heap of trouble. And he came in slamming and slamming, and finally I said, come on out here for a minute. And I'm like, what happened? And he told me, and he had cursed his assistant principal out. So I looked at him and I said, all right, here's the deal. You're in a heap of trouble. You should be suspended for what you said to her. Now, as soon as this bell rings, you march yourself to her office and apologize, because you know that was wrong. And he did, and he didn't get quite the heavy load. And came back and was like, oh. And he was truly sorry, but sometimes teenagers talk one way to themselves and then forget who they're talking to. So that's one of the things that I would do. It's hard when you got a class of 30 people in there and you've got one that really needs your attention. But I found a time to catch him. And sometimes you can and sometimes you cannot. And sometimes you see him in the hall and you just walk down the hall with him and have a little quick chat. Heaven forbid I had to have cafeteria duty, but that's also a place. That was not my favorite place, but it's the speaking to the kids, even if you don't know who they are in your congregation, get to know them. And all of a sudden they'll suddenly want to come by and sell you some cookies or magazines or anything else, but that's okay, because that opens the door. They don't know how to get the door open, but if they got something to sell, they do. So that's another way.
And I like your example about the boy too, because I think boys in our culture especially are taught, or they learn not to share their feelings. So they get stuck. Something happens, and then they're stuck. What do you do with all this? So you slam down the book, or you take it out on somebody else. So having a way to, I love your intervention, because it really was an intervention that you gave that person a pathway forward.
Yeah.
I guess it really depends on the situation, but that was a great example.
Thank you. And you know what? It's the same with people that that are adults who all of a sudden stop talking to you. Or all of a sudden, you feel this chill and you don't know what happened. It's not very, very different, but sometimes it is. And it takes a lot of courage to do that. It takes growing up. And, that's the way it is. I mean, I've been in lots of situations where when kids are invited to talk, and that was one thing I really liked about the school I was in. It was at Oakton, where we had it once a month, or every other week, I guess it was, with kids who would come in and we'd have a topic. And there would be another person come in the room with us, and then the kids, we would bring up the topic, and it would just fall out of them. They were scared to death that something was going to happen. Every time we had one of those drills and we were out in the bleachers for an hour and a half, they knew something was wrong. And, I would say to them, I know you want to go run around, you want to do things with your friends, but if I don't know where you are, I'm going to be in a panic, worrying. Now, I don't need any more gray hair. Let's just, be kind. Talk to the people that are around you and listen to what's going on. And they get that. They don't like it when you don't tell them what's going on. Depends on the age, but when I taught in high school a lot, it was like, these kids know more than I do. They know more what's going on. They tell me sometimes. But those things just have to happen. And I'd say, especially once the kids get to middle school and up, that's when you really need to keep the talking going and be friends with them and acknowledge them. And how did you do in school this week? Or I know you got your report card. You look happy. And, just nice things. Or ask them if they can come over and rake your lawn or something. I think all those things work. I used to have kids help me every time I changed classrooms, pack up everything. That was always fun, wasn't it? And so anyway, I think it's keeping the line of communication open. And if you can't remember somebody's name, and I am horrible at that, so I just fess up right away. I don't remember people's names. I know I've met you. Let's talk. And I may not remember 3 months from now if I don't see you between now and 3 months. That's just the way it is, but it doesn't mean I don't care. Just I'm not very smart. My brain power is waning.
I have one last question. Was there a specific time in your life that you recall that you became aware of the power of prayer? Or was it a gradual knowingness, awakening?
I remember when I was about 9 years old, sitting in a church pew by myself. And my home situation was not very pleasant. I had 2 sisters, one older, one younger, and 2 parents who should never have gotten together. And I had nothing. And I sat in that church that one day and I thought, oh, thank goodness, I've got nothing but you, God, and I know you're going to be enough. And I think I was 9. But my older sister thinks I'm a holy roller, and I'm okay with that. My younger sister has had so many things happen to her. She is in a full-time care facility and doesn't know me. She's no longer able to walk. She doesn't feed herself, and she's a year younger than I am. And she's been that way for 3 years. We don't exactly know what happened, but we think she had some head injuries. I've had to deal with some things in my family that haven't been pleasant, and some of you might have read about it in the newspaper years ago. But everybody that knew me knew it wasn't me. They just happened to get my name in the paper too. But I don't care. I know who I am, and I know what I'm doing, and I know how I love people and the faith that I have of doing right from wrong. I don't always do it perfectly, but I always try. And I think that because of God's presence in my life when my home life was really horrible, has brought me into good stead. The sooner it happened, the easier it was for me to turn to God when there was no one else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Read and pray, make your own prayers, and help your kids.
Are you trying to turn it on? I'm trying to turn it off. There's a little button right here.